Saudi Arabia's strict religious culture is part of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's plan to modernize Saudi Arabia in the hopes of attracting foreign talent and spurring economic growth. For more global news headlines, visit talkmedianews.com.
You will see. Afternoon. You're listening to KXRY Portland at 91.1 and 107.1 FM and KXRWLP Vancouver at 99.9, streaming online everywhere at xray.fm. Once again, I'm your host, Andre Middleton, and you're listening to Group Therapy. Each Monday and Wednesdays, we gather with friends and intellectuals to discuss issues that are disrupting our society and to support each other through the changes under this current federal administration. Once again, my name is Andre. During the day, I rep Open Signal, the PICA, which is the Portland Institute of Contemporary Art, and Friends of Noise. But today, as most Mondays from noon to 1, you can find me here talking with some amazing people, and we've got some amazing people here today. Today we're going to be talking about how we as a society can create basically safer spaces for young people to thrive. This may seem like a non-issue, but really it's a big deal. Sure, there are plenty of spaces where youth can exist, but how are we being intentional and thoughtful in ensuring physical spaces that are made available to create community for those who need it the most? Listeners, if you have something to say, you'd like to add your 2 cents, something to contribute, please send us a text or give us a call. Our text line is 971-220-5979. Once again, that is 971-220-5979. Or call in. We'd love to hear your voice at 503-233-9729. That is 503-233-9729. As always, you can send us an email at morning@xray.fm or look us up on our Facebook group. We're on all the socials, Group Therapy on X-Ray FM. Well, let me introduce today's guest. Well, I'd like to welcome back Jack Marvin.
How's it going?
Pretty good, Jack. How are you?
Good. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
He's an advocate for the Sexual and Gender Minority Youth Resource Center, also known as SMIRC. Big fan of them. Let's give a shout out to Emily Squires. I know she's out there doing stuff. We're doing the work.
Hey, Ems.
What's up, Emily? And with Jack, we've got Chase. What's up, Chase?
Hi.
Great to see you again.
Good to see you.
I know Chase has been like on speed dial with me for like the last 3 or 4 months, kicking it with Friends of Noise. So really thrilled to see them here today. And also we've got another recent guest, but actually you were in the studio the last time in the control booth. We've got Caitlin Young. She's the Resilience Director at Trillium Family Services. Hello, Caitlin.
Hello.
And we're going to be talking about Keep Oregon Well with you, aren't we?
Yes, we are.
Outstanding. So once again, I'm really thrilled that all 3 of you are here. Before we get started, any Halloween festivities for the 3 of you? Any dirt?
Oh, well, I mean, if we're talking about safer spaces for queer youth, my Halloween plans included going to Marrow PDX for both of their Halloween shindigs. And that was their Halloween open mic and just their Halloween party. And that's at Marrow PDX in North Portland. It's like a youth collective where they sell like a bunch of like youth made art and all that good stuff, and they host a bunch of all ages events.
So love Marrow PDX, love them. Danny Lynn is killing it up there. It's a great space, right off of Lombard. So really just, I mean, not quite St. John's, but pretty close to it. How about you, Jack? What'd you do this weekend?
I went to a zombie party on Saturday. It was lovely. First time I ever did zombie costume. That was fun. Okay. Yeah.
Caitlin? No, Caitlin's like, nah, I'm good. I was good. All right, so let's get right to it. In majority hetero cis normative society, physical and communal space is significantly harder to access for sexual and gender minorities. This can be particularly impactful in youth. Jack, can you speak to what a safer, more communal space looks like at SPIRC?
Yeah, so important things about SMIRC, I think, are, first of all, that it's youth-led and directed by youth. Adults are involved as, like, in a facilitation role. But first and foremost, like, SMIRC is for youth, by youth, and, like, the youth are centered in everything that we do. I think that that's really important in creating safer youth spaces, is that, like, the voice of the youth is centered. Additionally, like we're a bunch of queer folks who are involved in facilitating the space, and I think that that's important too. Is to have visible queer folks who are kind of helping to facilitate that safer space. So I think that like within that, like both of those aspects lend themselves to having youth feel safe safer at least in that space, and most importantly, like allows youth to like be the truest version of themselves in that space, and then allows a person who's allowed to like be that truest self for a new person coming in also kind of like is kind of modeling behavior as well. So that's really important.
One thing I love about that dynamic is that it removes the savior dynamic.
Yeah, absolutely.
That is so, sometimes that can be so toxic.
Right.
Because just the power dynamic between those who are being saved and those who are doing the saving. Mm-hmm. In this regard, it's not a matter of saving, it's a matter of being.
No, exactly. It's a matter of existing with these folks, and letting them really define like how even like they want us to interact in the space. And I think that that's really important, and something that I think we at SMIRC try to remain really, really conscious of is just that, like, everything that we do down to, like, how we are actually involved in the space is defined about how youth want.
Chase, let's hear some testifying. What's it like? How has it been empowering? How's it been had a positive impact on you and your community?
Sure. So I've used a lot of SMIRC resources because they are so readily available, and I agree with like just because like having a room full of adults that are also queer is like so important to just comfortability at all, just because like queer youth don't want to hang out with non-queer adults because there's no relation there. There's just like there's no connection, and it makes it so it doesn't feel safer. And SMIRC does a really good job of just like making sure that there's like, queer adults everywhere that are resources in themselves.
Right. Yeah. And how have you been able to take advantage of the youth leadership opportunities there? I mean, how are you sharing your voice and sharing your skills, your talent, your joie de vivre with not only the adults but the other people in your cohort?
Sure. I guess I'm more heavily involved with like Oregon Queer Youth Summit and Queer Rock Camp more than SMIRC activities. I guess like a couple years ago was more involved with SMIRC and organizing with them, doing stuff like that. I use SMIRC's resources a lot more than I do organizing with them right now, just because I'm focused on Oregon Queer Youth Summit and Queer Rock Camp a lot. But
I love that, because what I'm hearing you say is that I got some basic foundational organization skills that were geared towards me, that were modeled by people that I can relate to, and now I'm taking those out into the community and having positive impact in other spaces to try to make them safer for folks that are coming up behind me.
Definitely, yeah. SMRC definitely has brought me into like queer activism, and has just kind of been like a fallback for like well, I wouldn't say fallback, but like it's been like it's there, and it seems to intertwine with just about every other queer organizing thing that we do.
Jack looks like he's about to say something.
And I think that that's a really good point, is that SMRC is there when, like, we're there when you need us, and we are there when you don't need us, and come access and use us when you need us, and there's no hard feelings when you don't. Our hope is that at some point, like, nobody needs us.
Spread those wings.
Yeah.
Fly. So we've got another guest in here who I haven't really tapped yet, but Caitlin, I'm looking at you right now. Caitlin, can you please tell us about Trillium Family Services and the Keep Oregon Well campaign? How does this tie into making safer spaces for our youth?
Yeah, so Trillium Family Services is the largest provider of mental and behavioral health for youth in the state of Oregon, and we have all levels of care, from residential facilities all the way to prevention-based model of school-based service delivery. And Keep Oregon Well is a part of Trillium Family Services that is an advocacy campaign to reduce the stigma associated with mental and behavioral health. So it's really a coming out movement, and we try to tap into art, to music, to make mental health relatable, accessible, cool. And one of the really exciting projects that I'm playing a big role in right now is the Keep Oregon Well in schools. We've got some grants, and we've started in 2 local school districts, and the idea of creating a safe space, this idea of nothing for us without us, we are starting to create a prevention campaign with youth by inviting them into these initial meetings and saying, what is it you need? What is it you want? How can we support you? Let's see you. Let's create safety and access.
So if you'd mind me asking, first of all, that sounds incredible. And thank you for the work. Thank you, all 3 of you, for the work that you're doing. I'm going to thank you guys a lot throughout the course of this entire afternoon, I can assure you. But specifically, when we're talking about trans, when we're talking about queer, when we're talking about, gender minorities within this body of how do we make space safer for them, what are some of the efforts that Trillium is doing to make sure that we're really, decentering, white cis male normative and recentering people who have been marginalized and overlooked and basically invisible for decades?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question and an amazing point to tap into. We're delivering trauma-informed care, and simply stated, that means we want everybody at the table, and we approach our work with an equity lens and an inclusive lens. And a big piece of that is, are our service providers relatable? Is it someone that you feel safe talking to, approaching? And then, is this a service that I feel like I need and I want to be a part of? So basing our work in equity and inclusion, in trauma-informed care principles of social responsibility, of democracy, of nonviolence, and believing that mental health is physical health, to really help us all get a better understanding of how trauma impacts us, our brains, our bodies, and trauma on a scale, like oppression is trauma, toxic stress is trauma, and that impacts our brains, bodies, relationships.
Thank you. I'm reading here that Trillium practices a sanctuary model that outlines 7 commitments. Can you talk about some of those commitments for us real quick?
Sure, yeah. I've tapped into a couple of them, social responsibility being one of them. And under the social responsibility umbrella, that's where we're going to put equity and inclusion work. Emotional intelligence. How do we feel? And do we have words to explain how we feel and express how we feel? A culture of nonviolence, a real focus on creating safety. And when we talk about safety, we're not just talking about physical safety, although that's essential. We're talking about social, emotional safety. We're talking about cultural safety. And And then, of course, the physical safety component.
Right. Jack, are there similar models or similar, commitments that SMERC has been making not only for themselves, but for the community that they've been working with?
I'm sorry.
Well, I guess, I mean, can you give us a little bit more about the mission of SMERC?
Yeah,
and what drives those, what values are driving that mission?
Yeah, of course. I mean, like, I'm going to go back to youth. I mean, like, the values of our youth drive our mission. And so SMERC is a community space and resource center, as Chase was mentioning. But also we do a ton of education work in the community and in schools and supporting QSAs in schools. We have a education arm called Bridge 13 because we believe that it is not the on our youth to be educating adults on queer and trans, gender and sexual justice. So Bridge 13 is our training program. It's a really awesome facilitated workshop by one of our 3 trainers. And we work all throughout the community. We're actually working in schools right now doing gender and sexual justice, like part of a course in a really cool alternative school out east. We work with healthcare providers, more kind of professional type setting, folks who are providing services to queer and trans folks to get them up to speed on some of the just the equity surrounding it. Equity, I think, is at the core of like what SMERC is and does, like equity and support.
Great. Chase, you mentioned earlier there is a Oregon Queer Youth Summit coming up. My ears pricked up when I heard that because community is so much of what I'm about, and empowering and connecting with and finding resources that we can share, and sharing my own privilege as a cis-normative male. Can you give us a little information about the summit that's coming up and why it is such a needed and valuable resource for the community?
Yeah, totally. So the Oregon Queer Youth Summit has been happening for a couple of years now, and I'm not sure if that's like the actual date that's happening. I think that might be.
It typically happens. Typically happens in May, right?
Yeah, it typically happens in May.
We got time.
And and we actually haven't started our meetings for this upcoming OCUS yet, but that's why we don't have dates, because we get together. Adults and queer youth get together and we plan Oregon Queer Youth Summit for youth by youth, basically, and the adults are mostly there to again, like SMERC, facilitate, do the hard stuff that we don't want to do, which we really appreciate, it's a day-long summit where we do workshops. We do we have food all day. We do queer prom. We do open mics. We have performances. We basically organize with the youth to figure out what they want for this year's OCUS and make those dreams come true as well as we can.
Right. So what are some of the steps or communication strategies that you've seen used to build trust, to get people to participate in this process? I mean, I have to admit, big projects often mean a lot of red tape, a lot of bureaucracy, and I have to admit, that's a bummer for me. And I need to know, how am I going to be heard? How am I going to be listened to? How do I know that my contribution is not just for me to be a checked box, but for me to actually to do something real?
Definitely. So, let me think about that for a second.
I mean, like, to me and my understanding of OCUS and, like, SMERC is kind of involved in OCUS and supporting a little bit. But it's really, again, and I'm going to sound like a broken record
repetition.
Is like leaving all of the planning and the details up to youth and like letting them plan it, and then it's our job to like step in where they ask us to, like, hey, there's this thing we don't want to do, can you do this thing?
Yeah, definitely. We ask for help where we need it mostly, and there is like it's hard to get all of the things that we want. We do a lot of fundraising, we do a lot of asking for help, we do a lot of asking because we don't already have the resources. So,
that's pretty good.
Yeah, that's what I got.
That's good. Caitlin, I noticed that our mutual friend Logan Lynn has been hyping all weekend a new physical space for Keep Oregon Well. Can you tell us a little about that and how this might be a way of contributing to the notion of safer spaces?
Absolutely, yeah. We're creating a wellness zone at our office on Powell. And it's a Keep Oregon Well wellness zone. So there's swag for sale, right? That's a piece, right? Repping the Keep Oregon Well message. And I can't tell you how many stories that I've heard, really powerful stories of someone just simply wearing a t-shirt or a sweatshirt or a hat and being asked, what does Keep Oregon Well mean? And opening up a safe space for people to tell their story of how mental health has touched their own lives or the life of someone really dear to them. And how that can be, just opening up the conversation can support people in getting the help and service that they need. So you can get your swag at the Keep Oregon Well store in the Wellness Zone. And we have plans to expand for some space for self-care and things like that.
Great. Going back to notion of community, and we've got plenty of time, can I get you to shout out and rep some partners and some organizations that you've partnered with? I mean, we couldn't fit everybody into the small studio who's working on this, but I'd love to make sure that they knew that we were willing to represent and give them a shout out.
You bet. Yeah, I mean, some of our closest school partners are schools right now. Portland Public, and we're out in Centennial School District and Gladstone School District. Those are our Keep Oregon Well districts at this moment. We've explored grant opportunities through Providence. We are playing a big role in the 3 to PhD program, which is up in North Portland with the Fabian School, and that was a grand opening, and truly I'm so proud to be a part of that collaboration where we're offering mental health service in the elementary school. Kaiser Permanente has opened up a physical health facility that's gorgeous. They also have dental service, and then Basics, who is formerly Pacific Foods, is offering food for youth and families. So it's a really beautiful example of community coming together to provide services that are needed.
I think it's fair to say that for most of our brothers and sisters on the entire spectrum who have dealt with being marginalized and stigmatized, it often happens in schools. And it also often happens, like I said, at young ages, because kids go home and they explain what they did at school, and their parents say, what the heck's going on? Oh, almost, that was close. So my question for you is, what are some of the accomplishments, or what's some of the growth that you're seeing in schools based on applying, hey, how do we destigmatize not only mental health, but also how are we stigmatizing the othering of people in general?
Well, to your first point, I think bringing mental health and physical health into the school setting is a huge step toward reducing barriers to access. I mean, folks who cannot travel to get the care they need, or don't have insurance and aren't able to sign up to start the process, that's all there on campus. And if families are dropping their youth off at school, then it's a lot easier to say, oh, if you just go over there to the health center, like, we can get you hooked up with some services. So I think that's been huge. And I will say, I was working as a school-based mental health therapist in Centennial School District for several years, and that, knowing that parents didn't have to hop on the bus and drive their kids to a clinic, that I could actually meet with them right after school or right before school or during the school day even. That was a huge reduction in barriers to access.
Great, thank you. Jack, can you give us some shout out to some of the community partners that SMERC's been working with?
Absolutely, I'd be happy to.
Give us some love.
Yeah, so we work a lot with Sun School, the Sun School system. Big snaps, yes,
Yeah.
Chase.
Yeah. I worked in the Sun program.
Did you?
I did. I ran a middle school GSA.
Nice.
I've also worked in the Sun program.
I want to work in the Sun
Sun
program.
I know, everybody, it's Sun.
Yeah, Sun.
And so we're really lucky to be working with them. We also work a lot with Cascadia Behavioral Health, who we have in our spaces again.
Nothing but love.
We're working to really destigmatize and open up the conversation around mental health, because you said mental health is physical health. So working with Cascadia quite a bit. They actually hold hours in our space. We're really lucky to have them. Tons of amazing community partners. Pacific, and we work a lot with Open School. We're working with the Boys and Girls Club quite a bit. The Rosewood out east, just so many fantastic organizations that we get the opportunity to work with. New Avenues for Youth is our parent organization, so we are a program of New Avenues, and we've been that happened about 2 years ago now, and we're really lucky to kind of have them be our kind of parent organization and able to support us. It's really opened up a lot of doors. We've been able to open up a new satellite location of SMERC out east in East County at 165th and Stark, which we're really excited about. We meet every Wednesday, have it open, on Wednesdays from 3 to 7, and then we're downtown at Columbia and Lake 12th, Monday, Tuesday, and Friday 4 to 8. So, and pretty soon, hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll be opening up on Thursdays out east again. So we'll be open Wednesdays and Thursdays out east from 3 to 7.
This is we got about 4 or 5 minutes left. Chase, quick question for you, and please, everybody else can chime in afterwards. How important is it to having a safer physical space to do this work? I mean, it's one thing to to meet and to be all over town, but how is it? What kind of impact does it have to know that there's a place that you and your folks can go to that you're not looking over your shoulder?
It's so important. Like, just the most important thing, to be able to have a space where you can go and feel like yourself, like you can feel like you can talk to people about the things that you don't get to talk about other places, because it is stigmatized to just even talk about being gay anywhere, because or queer or trans or anything, because it's just like, when it's not the norm in the room, then it makes it feel a little uncomfortable. And so it's one of the most important things. I think having a physical space for queer youth of all ages is really important. Getting those spaces into younger spaces, into the SUN programs, like having the GSAs in middle schools, the QSAs in middle schools. That's really important. And I think that, like, not just important, but necessary. It should be mandatory for schools to have that kind of space, because I know that when I was in middle school, if I had that GSA that I got to run, I would have been so much more comfortable in myself by the time I got to high school. I would have been able to be an educator right away.
Right. And that is important. That's important on so many levels, whether it's representation, whether it's modeling, whether it is just saving space and holding space. I think that is so important. But I have to give you props. I have seen you all over the place. I saw you at ArchSpark 2 weeks ago. You performed Preventive Noise. You're going to be doing a thing with Oregon, Keep Oregon Well, coming up in a couple of weeks. So, space or not, you have a safe space zone around you 24/7.
Well, I try to use all the resources that I can, because that's how you get by as a queer youth. Using the resources, fighting for accessibility, fighting for all ages queer youth spaces is what I do. So I try to keep myself involved in as many things as I can, so that everybody knows that there are disabled queer youth that want to scream about their feelings,
Well, I want to say thank you. I really, really want to say how much I appreciate it. I really, really do.
Well, I appreciate having space to talk about it.
Great. Well, we are going to be coming up on a break. Please, if you'd like to join in this conversation, we'd love to hear from you. You can give us a call. Our studio line is 503-233-9729. Once again, that is 503-233-9729. Or send us a text if you're, maybe got a frog in your throat, you're feeling a little shy. Our phone number, our text line is 971-220-5979, 971-220-5979. See you on the other side.
Support for X-Ray FM comes from the Hollywood Theater, Portland's nonprofit historic movie theater, showing classic, contemporary, and cult films every night of the week. Located at Northeast Sandy Boulevard in the heart of the Hollywood District. Showtimes and event listings at hollywoodtheater.org.
Support for X-Ray FM comes from Bridge City Cleaning Service, a local company providing custom cleaning to hundreds of homes in the greater Portland area. More information at bridgecitycleaning.com or by phone at 503-238-1232.
Support for X-Ray FM is brought to you by Back to Eden Bakery, specializing in 100% plant-based, vegan, gluten-free baked goods, pastries, desserts, and ice cream since 2009. Now offering brunch 7 days a week and pizza, salads, spirits, and more for dinner. Back to Eden Bakery is located at 2215 Northeast Alberta Street and is open daily from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. Support for X-Ray FM comes from Hallie Ford School of Graduate Studies at Pacific Northwest College of Art. Their 6 graduate programs serve as a dynamic creative center for emerging artists and designers with an educational philosophy that emphasizes individualized curricula, independent inquiry, and cross-disciplinary exchange. Programs within the Hallie Ford School of Graduate Studies at PNCA support students as they grow and define a distinctive, sustainable, and engaged artistic practice that will continue to evolve years after graduation. More information can be found at pnca.edu/graduate.
Welcome back to Group Therapy. If you're listening to us right now, you're probably listening to us on KRXY Portland at 91.1 and 107.1 FM. And if you're listening to us from Vancouver, Washington, you're listening to us on KXRWLP Vancouver at 99.9 FM. Or maybe you're streaming us on your phone or your computer or your laptop or your tablet, everywhere at xray.fm. Well, once again, welcome back to Group Therapy. I'm your host, Andre Middleton, and today we've got 3 amazing guests. We've got Jack Marvin from SMERC. Hey, Jack.
Hey.
We've got Chase Milo Reed. What's up, Chase?
Hello.
And we've got Caitlin Young from Trillium Family Services.
Hello.
Hello, Caitlin. So, before we left the break, we were talking about physical safe spaces, and I think it's important for us to transition to start talking about, the institutions that are involved in making spaces safe, or not doing the job and trying to make our spaces safer. So I think we'd like to maybe start off with maybe with Caitlin. Caitlin, you mentioned that you had been working with local schools, and whether it was PFLAG back in the day, hopefully still current. We've got Sankofa coming up, right now. Can you talk about some of the acceptance or pushback from institutions about embracing, like I said, the lack of othering, or not just, how are these places wrestling with the increase in advent of people demanding safer space for themselves?
Yeah, I'm reminded of a story of my teammate and colleague who's working out at a local school district with middle school age clients, and had several clients through a prevention group that she was leading who were saying there's no GSA in this middle school and we need a GSA. And these students were not feeling empowered. They were making requests to the school, and it was with the support of this mental health advocate to, be able to be an organization, a mental health organization serving in the school. And we've got contracts, there's politics involved there. But to say this is a space that's essential, it's deserved, the students are asking for it, how can we make this happen? And now that school does have a GSA. And I think it was a collaboration of youth asking for what they needed to an adult that felt safe. And that adult that felt safe also had some privilege and power in their position to advocate and make some changes.
Great. Jack, you too. Would you mind giving us, what institutions you feel are either allies and lining up behind and joining the fight, or what institutions are actually pushing against it? I mean, who do we need to put our energy into?
As far as like institutions here in Portland that are supporting, you know what? Again, to mention some of the folks that we work with, we work really closely with Brave Space, which is an awesome resource for trans folks. It's a mental health resource for trans folks. There's the Northwest Gender Alliance. There's the Family Acceptance Project. These are all PFLAG. There's Transactive here in Portland. These are all places that are great resources for folks to go and get information, and who are actively. So like it's really interesting. So there's this like education piece which a lot of these organizations are doing, and then there's the service to the individuals, which I think is really important to balance, to have a balance of the two. Okay,
and a quick follow-up. As I mentioned earlier, I can remember a time where before the It Gets Better campaign, and I remember a time where, if you didn't dress the right way, if you didn't play in the right team, or if you didn't kick it with the right crowd, how people were quick to label you, and can you recall a time when you as an individual are thriving as a youth, coming into your queerness and becoming a strapping young man that you are? But do you remember
really overselling me.
But do you remember a time where when did that moment happen for you, when you realized this is who I am, and I am proud of who I am, and I'm going to thrive despite the lack of safety in the spaces that I inhabit on a daily basis?
Yeah, of course. So interesting question for a guy like me, because I'm later in life coming outer. I did not have a safe space as a young person. I, in fact, didn't have anyone to even like an adult to like model what like queerness looks like. So it was much later for me that like and it was frankly after I've like found people who are like, oh my god, these people are like me, and I can model, like I see myself in these people, and I think that's really important and a huge piece of the work that like SPIRK aims to do. So it wasn't until much later in life that I like had that perspective and like was able to kind of like align that with who I was as a person. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you very much, and very beautifully too. Mm-hmm. Chase, how about you? I see. I from the moment that I met you through Kids Table. Mm-hmm. And through Saturn, right? Give shout out to Kids Table.
Check them out on Spotify.
And that's not with an apostrophe. Make sure people know that. Is it?
Oh, there is an apostrophe. It just has to be in the right place.
Has to be in the right place. When did you own and, like I said, create this safe zone around you?
Well, I don't know if there is really a safe zone around a visible queerness or whatever. But and I wouldn't know. I don't know if I'll ever be like super comfortable and completely confident in that aspect of like safety and stuff. But when I like realized that I was queer, sure, I think that was like middle schoolish around for me, and I didn't come out until. And I say come out because I like made a video and I put it on YouTube until my junior year in high school, and still I come out every single day, every time that I have to like be in public or have to assert my pronouns, which are he, they, by the way, so yeah, I come out every day, but I guess to kind of go off of what Jack was saying about how there wasn't really a space to kind of realize that for yourself. That's like a big thing. Like if there's not the queer adults around, if there's not the language around, it's hard to figure out who you are, if you enjoy labels, if you are queer at all, because like you don't think about what you're thinking about not being what other people are thinking about. And I want you to know that I have air quotes up.
It's interesting you put it that way because I went and saw a film called Tom of Finland. Jack in there, sorry about that. with a good friend Salvador, and it was a wonderful film. And we both had to start thinking about how queerness was a part of our lives growing up. I'm from New York City. So I'm accustomed to New York City and Fire Island and the AIDS epidemic and ACT UP. And I remember, even as a cis, black man in America, the first teacher that I realized was gay. And I remember it not being a thing. Maybe because I grew up in New York City as opposed to, Puxatawny, Idaho. You know what I'm saying? So I think it brings up an interesting, thought process around Portland being this very so-called liberal city, and how, despite
those were air quotes.
Those are huge air quotes, like arm quotes. But I think it's important to realize about where people are coming from. I imagine that young people growing up in Miami right now are having a different experience than growing up in Paris or growing up in Texas. So the space, the environment has a huge impact on how people feel safe through us. And I think that what Keep Oregon Well is trying to do is trying to address that. Yeah. How do we generalize that? How do we universalize the notion that, it got me thinking that for a long time there, being queer was classified as a mental illness, and it isn't. And there are people recently in the news talking about, remember back in the day it was a mental illness, maybe we need to do this and do that. So can you talk a little bit about how Keep Oregon Well is really trying to get to the heart of destigmatizing, and how that can be a very, very broad approach?
Well, I think showing up in community, having booths and a visual presence at Pride or at just any kind of community event where we're all over the place, so that's part of the landscape. And then people are like, what is this? What is Keep Oregon Well? And it's a mental health stigma reduction campaign and advocacy. And I think one thing that we know is the stigma associated with being non-binary or with the LGBTQ plus community is that there is a higher correlation with mental health and suicidal ideation behaviors. There is a real need for supportive mental health services. And when we move that upstream, not only do we need services now to support, but we actually need different, if you think about this oppression as something that's in the water, we need to change the quality of the water. And to do that, we need to look at a prevention model, and that prevention model is inclusive to all people. So regardless of their sexual orientation, gender identification, their race, their ethnicity, and that's the message that Keep Oregon Well wants to broadcast.
That almost sounds like anti-white supremacy to me.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Snaps. More snaps.
But you were going to say something, Jack?
I was just going to say, as far as moving that upstream is the education piece. And I think that, especially as it relates to queer and trans folks and sexual and even racial justice and gender justice, is just education of those folks. And again, it is not the responsibility, especially from a SMERC perspective, not the responsibility of a youth to be educating an adult, which is why that we could take that on as an organization as a part of that Bridge 13 training. And I think that like you said, moving it further upstream, and educating, and even taking this education into classrooms. Like I said earlier, Bridge 13 is now has a curriculum built into a class out east, actually at Open School, Snaps to Open School.
Snaps to Open School.
Right?
Queer rocking.
Yeah, right? But for wanting to do that hard work, and work that isn't always comfortable to do as a school, especially with kind of the relationship that a school has to have with students and parents and guardians.
When we talk about upstream, though, I find myself concerned at the amount of paralysis at a variety of governmental levels, whether it's on the federal level or even here in the state. There are so many states that are either controlled by a Republican governor and a Republican legislature, or a state like Oregon where it's practically 50-50, where you have this rural and urban divide, where you have, people that are really ultra conservative based upon their wanting to have guns, or they're wanting to not be Sharia law, and their disapproval or hatred for people who don't fit into their cisgendered normality of what things should be like. How are we, what can we do as individuals to start pushing the needle so that whether it's our governor or our attorney general or, different people within the legislature are going to take notice of this and realize that this needs to be a primary component of our health discussion moving forward?
I think that paralysis is real. And I think we have to just start where we are. We have to start in the community that we're in the school that we go to, or our kids go to. And, we actually, Trillium Family Services is proud to be part of this Building Community Resilience Collaborative, and that is one of the slogans is to move healthcare upstream. And the Building Community Resilience Collaborative provides tools to anyone who's providing any level of healthcare to youth, including policy and legislative support and toolkits. We've had a few convenings here in Portland and for the state of Oregon where we're bringing people together from Portland Public, from higher education, from physical health services, from food, community voices, mental health, and having conversations about how can we work together? How can we, it takes all of us to move the needle, and every single one of us at a time, but it's so much easier if we link arms.
Right. Can I get a shout out for Chosen Family? Can I get a snap for Chosen Family? I think when thinking about, so many friends that I've met over the years who had to leave home, who hit the streets and created Chosen Family. And this is like prior to Outside In Days. This is prior to Janice. This is prior. Right. Jack, can you talk a little bit about the importance of these spaces for these chosen families and how these families are sustaining people today? And how it's so important that today people realize that there are spaces, that there are ways that their chosen family could be in a safe space. Can you talk a little bit about that impact?
Yeah, absolutely. So, to quickly rewind, I think that, a huge piece of, first of all, give some background here. About 40% of the folks who are homeless here in Portland are queer or trans-identified, right. Which is, disproportionate to, an alarming degree. Huge part of that is family acceptance issues, and we see a ton of folks who are kicked out of their homes because of a lack of acceptance, or who leave their homes because their home is not a safe place, and it's a very real thing for them that the street feels more safe than their home does, which is really horrifying to me. But as far as chosen family, and this is what SMRC is about. We're about creating a chosen family, and touching back on the physical space stuff is I think that a family needs a home, and we're going back to the physical space thing. And I think that physical space is essential to community, which is why why we think that it's so important that SMRC has a dedicated space that is SMRC's, and really SMRC youth's space. When I say SMRC, it is the youth. The adults are merely involved to pay the bills. So yeah, I think that chosen family is incredibly important, and it's something that we talk a lot about in our space, and it's something that we try to foster in our spaces is that sense of belonging to a unit of people who love and accept you no matter what. And I think that that's why SMRC is a really safe space, because it's full of people who want to be loved and accepted, and who are willing then to offer that out. So it's kind of give and take.
Great. That is so important. And I want to give a brief connector, because I can't get over how on this particular day, I've got connections with all three of these people here. I rep a group called Friends of Noise, and we have had Chase perform for us on several occasions. And he's going to be, actually they're going to be performing at an event coming up soon at the Oregon Public House. Caitlin, can you tell us a little bit about that event?
Yeah, and on November 13th, the Oregon Public House is Keep Oregon Well is the charity of the day. So all day long, lunch, dinner, we have proceeds going to fund our campaign to reduce stigma. And Friends of Noise will be providing musical entertainment. We also have drag queen bingo lined up after that. And then we have some mental health conscious comedy to round out the night. So
Great. Yeah, they reached out to me right out of the blue and said, hey, we'd love to have some young people perform at this event. And Chase was the first person that I emailed. And then I reached out to a young woman of color named Alex Mahogany, who could not play the Directors Park event that we did this summer. So kept her in the mental database, and I wanted to make sure she got tuned in as well. And then a big fan of Smirk. We had a Music for Everyone Day at City Hall, and Smirk tabled, and it was just an incredible event, and I feel honored to have all three of you in the studio, because it shows what community cohesiveness can really accomplish, where you find yourself in the same path, you're doing the right thing, and you build and build and build and build and build. Yeah. So real quick, another great organization out there, Basic Right Oregon, does an amazing job in advocating for queer and trans-friendly spaces in workplaces, but the majority of businesses and organizations don't know where to start. Generally, the responsibility for creating these safe spaces really, unfortunately, falls on the folks who are identifying as those who need the spaces. How do we change that dynamic? How do we push the labor onto them instead of it always falling on us?
I think that it comes down to like really intentional conversations with these folks and saying like, and there's different levels of comfortability. I depending upon my relationship with the person, am willing to do kind of that legwork for them. But I think it's really important that if you're out there and you're listening and you're like, how do I get the information? Like, Google is a powerful machine, and start there. Pick up a book. And it's a lot more powerful to go to a queer or trans person and say like, hey, do you have any idea where I can find a resource, or do you have a good resource, instead of asking like, tell me about this thing. Because it's funny. I see it in both ways. I both see it as my responsibility to help educate, and also, and that's kind of in my role as a Smirk, and on a personal level, like, it is not my job necessarily, and it's definitely not the job of a queer or trans youth to educate really anyone, maybe a peer. But I think that it's about like encouraging those who want to be allies, and I think that's another huge important piece of this conversation, is that so many times it's like, how can we create an ally? The fact of the matter, from my perspective, is that you can't create an ally. An ally has to want to be an ally before they're
going to be open to the transformation.
Exactly. And then once they are there, I mean, it's about like then going online and like type in LGBTQ plus 101. I promise you 1,000 things will come up, and it's at the very least you're able then to approach a conversation with a queer or trans person with like some information, and it's really powerful when, as a queer person, when someone approaches me and wants to talk about it, and at least has like a jumping off point.
Right.
That's just me though.
Well, I want to give a shout out to a huge ally out there. Big shout out to U.S. District Judge Colleen Kalar-Catelli of the federal court, who just today blocked Trump's ban on transgendered folks from serving in the military.
Woo!
So big snaps up for that. We've got about 5 minutes left. I want to give each and every one of you an opportunity to let's go over some final thoughts. Folks, if you're listening out there, you still have time. Give us a call, 503-233-9729, or send us a text. Please, we'd love to get your input, 971-220-5979. Let's start with you, Chase. Any final thoughts? What would you like people to take away from this? And any shout-outs, any events, anything you want to make sure that people know how they can plug in and participate moving forward?
Sure. I guess the most important thing is that safer spaces for queer youth are not just important, they're necessary. Making them accessible for queer youth of just all kinds. And so That means accessibility in a lot of different ways, learning, educating yourself on how to make the spaces safer is, again, important and necessary. Queer Rock Camp, really cool. Oregon Queer Youth Summit, both two things. If you want a safe space, we're creating it by and for youth. And if you want to be a part of creating that, if you're a queer youth, you can, because we're open and inviting so that we get every perspective that we can, and we're listening to everybody's needs, no matter their background.
And now's the time for them to start to get involved, to start planning for the next one, correct?
Yeah, definitely.
Is there a Facebook group, or where should people look to?
I think we have a Facebook group for both Oregon Queer Youth Summit and Queer Rock Camp Portland.
Yeah, if you Google Queer Rock Camp or OQYS, it's Oregon Queer Youth Summit, OQYS.org. There is contact information there, and you're going to want to shoot an email off to be part of the kind of information, still putting together, I think, kind of the planning committee for OQYS and Queer Rock Camp. OQYS happens in the beginning, middle of the year, May-ish. Queer Rock Camp happens later in the summer. But yeah, still plenty of time to get involved with both those things.
And also, if you're not a queer youth that wants to get involved, it is like super good to use your privilege in any way that you can to help queer youth. So in any way that you can find out how to do that, ask for resources, ask for the way that you can educate yourself, and then you can come on in and help us.
Yeah, and if you want to donate to OQYS or Queer Rock Camp,
because we make Queer Rock Camp free for all of the campers, and we do that by fundraising. So that's a free, all ages, safe space. And that's what we need.
And it's like a week-long, learn how to play guitar and then rock out at the end.
I even taught how to play guitar, so you can learn guitar from me.
There you go.
I'm sold. Jack, final thoughts? Shout-outs, what's happening?
Yeah, I think that, in the conversation of talking about making space for youth, again, broken record, is centering the voice and the needs of the youth. Whether I don't care if it's a queer youth, I don't care if it's if you're trying to create a safer space for a young person, it has to be their voice that's directing that space. And so that's kind of my big thing for today, and what a huge focus of SMIRC is. Check us out on Facebook. We have 2 youth pages, so if you are a young person wanting to get connected with SMIRC, check out the SMIRC East youth page or the SMIRC youth page. There's a SMIRC Facebook page as well. That's the organizational page. We do tons of rad posts there. But you can get an idea of what's happening at SMIRC. On our cover photo is our calendar of events, so you can come check it out and see what's going on at SMIRC. If you are in need of some training and attention, hit us up at Bridge 13. Google SMIRC or Bridge 13 and get connected to us there. We're happy to help educate.
Great. Caitlin, last but not least.
I want to echo what you're saying, Jack, about nothing for us without us. Really, that's the message when it comes to creating safe space for youth. And I guess a couple other things is the power of curiosity when paired with active listening and validation can really do a lot.
Lovely sentiment. I love it.
Drop it like it's hot.
Yeah. Finally, I just want to encourage people to come out to Oregon Public House on November 13th and check us out at keeporegonwell.com. We've got Facebook, Instagram. We also have a calendar of events. And if you're interested in more about trauma-informed services for your organization, I facilitate trainings, so you can find me there.
Yay. Great. In the short time we have left, I want to make sure that I give a quick shout out to intersectionality. It is so important to realize that we all live in multiple boxes, and it's only when we're willing to rip down the walls and remove the boxes that we can join our arms and work together towards a common goal. It is so important. That's what they don't want us to do. That they are intent on putting us in little boxes and separating us and not seeing how our combined power can really make a change in the system. And that's what we really need, is systemic change. Yes, it's one thing to meet with one ally and to change one mind and work on that, and that's good. I'm not pushing that down, but in order for there to be changes that are really going to have a long-lasting, real impact, we really got to come together. So thank you so much for listening to us today. Thanks to all our guests. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Tune in to hear a discussion about racial bias in the media with Natalie Sept this Wednesday, the same time, only on X-Ray.fm. Take care and peace.
You're listening to KXRY